Aldari Jones here with the next installment of our Tier 1 frigate guides for Abyssal Lurkers. Today we're going to cover the Ishkur. For those that don't know, the Ishkur is a hybrid turret boat that just happens to be able to field 5 full light drones and then have a backup of 5 light drones. And those drones have a hit point bonus, but they do not have a damage or a tracking bonus. So with that in mind, what we want to do when designing this Ishkur fit is we don't want to lean, too heavily into drones, and we cannot lean too heavily into hybrid turrets because they are weak for this type of content, and especially hybrid or small hybrid turrets. With that in mind, let's talk through the fit on the left side of the screen here. For our low slots, we're just going to do a small armor repper. The Ishkur has an armor repair bonus, so this single repper is going to be all the tank that we need. We're going to run 2 drone damage amplifiers. I have tried a drone damage amp plus a mag stab to go 1-on-1 on the weapon system that we're bonusing, but I find that a lot of times, especially with an Afterburner, you're just not using the hybrid turrets as much as you're relying on the drone. So I've opted to go for 2 drone damage amps here. You could change this based on preference, but for the purpose of this guide, I'm going to go with double drone damage amp. For the mid slots, there's actually quite a bit of flexibility here. I'm running an Afterburner. You could run a micro warp drive, but that really wants a more experienced pilot who is strict with their capacitor control. You want to make sure you're not over-repping on a spawn like the Knight. And I can actually show you a clip of the micro warp drive version fighting a Knight, and you'll see just how much management that goes into that. But yeah, other than that, the mid slot, we're going to have a small cap battery, pretty standard. Since we're brawling, we need to have some kind of cap reinforcement to be able to face targets like the Knight. We're going to use a web to be able to hold our targets in place so we can actually get within range to apply any type of blaster damage. And then this 4th spot is a tracking disruptor. Now that is definitely a flex spot. I like to use it because we can abuse tracking and ranges of enemies in the Abyss to one, draw them closer to us to make them a little bit easier to pull into blast range, and against the larger targets you can just apply a tracking disruption script, and they are, they're already probably not going to hit you with an Afterburner, but on something like a Knight, when you're boating in with an Afterburner speed, having the tracking disruptor really helps mitigate a lot of damage. If you don't want to use the tracking disruptor, you can definitely place something else there. I don't think it's worth running more capacitor, especially with the Afterburner fit, and even if you go with the micro warp drive fit, you're not really going to get enough capacitor where it suddenly just becomes easy to perma-run everything. For the high slots, we're going to run 3 light neutron blaster 2s, and our ammo type for these blasters is you're going to use Null way more often than Void. With my skills, Null will outdamage Void beyond 3,300 meters, and you'll find in practice that a lot of times you're just not going to maintain a range closer than 3,300 meters against things like Damavik. So if you were to only take Null against frigates, that would be more than viable. There are times where, even against Damaviks, you could make an argument to swap to Void. But if you just only brought out Void for battleships and, large targets in general, other than Tesseras, that would be, mostly optimal choice for how to use these blasters. And as far as blasters versus rails, I've tried a number of fits here, and there's just no rail setup where, the range that it gives me is worthwhile to me versus how much damage I give up when I can actually get within range of blasters. But again, you're mostly going to be relying on your drone DPS to get through these rooms, so pick what makes sense here. And then this last spot is going to go to a NOS. There are quite a number of enemies that you can NOS in the Abyss, especially as a frigate. And really though, the main thing is, when you're fighting a Knight or a Cynabal, you can use the NOS to offset the cap pressure coming in on yourself. Rigs are pretty straightforward. I'm going to run a Tech 2 collision accelerator. This is pretty comparable to running a Tech 2 mag stab. So, while we have the drone damage amps and the lows, we're going to use our rig slot to buff our blaster damage just a little bit. And then we're going to run a small auxiliary nano pump here to help our tank just a little bit. I mean, this is only a 2-slot tank, but what you'll find is with the web and the tracking disruptor, we're going to be able to mitigate quite a lot of damage and don't really need much tank at all. For drones, What you'll see in the guide here is I mainly run Navy Hornets just because I would rather have more uptime versus spawns with Skybreakers or when we're fighting around Deviant Towers like you see on the screen here. But you can run a full flight of Tech 2 if you would rather pull those out against the battleships. I mean, you have a web anyway, so Tech 2 are going to apply just fine. And if you find yourself losing a lot of these light drones, I would honestly use Tech 2 and just leave the Navy back in your hangar. And then to finish up the fit, I typically don't talk about what goes in the cargo hold, but you do want to bring optimal range and tracking speed disruption scripts here, and then you'll bring a good bit of null ammo and then void ammo. As far as when to use which script, I really wouldn't overthink it. You know, if you're fighting an enemy at range and you're trying to mitigate damage, then use the optimal range script. If you're fighting them close, then usually the tracking speed script is going to be the right call. On something like a Devoted Knight, what you'll see me do is I'll single cycle optimal range as I'm spiraling in, and then once I'm close, I will swap over to tracking speed. And then as you've seen in the other guides, once you're in a 500 meter orbit, especially with an Afterburner, especially with the web, doesn't matter what you use, the Knight's not going to hit you. As we go throughout this guide and start talking room spawns, if there's an interesting place to use a specific script, I will definitely bring it up. I know this fit looks like it has a lot going on, but a lot of spawns, for example, you're not going to use the NOS. Some spawns, you know, you're not going to benefit a whole lot from the tracking disruptor. So I honestly think it's a great setup to learn how to micromanage different modules and try to work through when you might get value out of one or the other. Going through that process is honestly super important on every type of fit, and even if we took all this EWAR off, you would want to be doing it when figuring out when to use void or null. Moving into the room guides, what I want to show you here to start is actually a Devoted Knight, and what I want to do is, you know, if I fly against this Knight perfectly, I'm not going to take really any damage, and I don't think there's a lot of educational value there. So what I'm going to show you is, you know, I'm distracted, I decycle my Afterburner, I'm not going to have a great approach here, I'm going to take a lot of damage, and I'm going to show you that there is room for error here, and you don't, you know, need to be a perfect pilot to close the distance against this Knight and get in here and kill it with your blaster DPS while your drones kind of plink away. As always with my guides, I'm going to recommend you spiral in on targets like the Devoted Knight or a Lucifer Cynabal. You're going to click around them so that you're not flying directly at them, and as you get closer, you know, probably for this fit, once you're within web range, you're going to activate a 500 meter orbit to get under the guns. And you can see here, even with this Knight benefiting from this tracking tower and with our use of the tracking disruption script, we can actually get under his guns as we got pretty closer. He was landing some solid hits, but we are going to be okay. And you can see that, you know, now that we're in this orbit, I'm going to decycle my tracking disruptor. I'm not using my repper at all, so I can just put all of my cap into my Afterburner and guns and web. And then this is a good example of where you can actually use the Nosferatu. You really would not need the NOS here, but it is some free cap that does help as we whittle this Knight down. I mean, I keep saying whittling here, but in this close orbit with Void, we are doing about 332 DPS with Navy Hornets as well, so it is not terrible DPS. Moving on to the Cynabal here, since there's an Echo in this spawn, I should be sending my drones to kill this Echo because it's a second web and it's a thin target, so by the time I'm actually within range of this Cynabal, this Echo should be dead. And you should see me here, yeah, I single cycle this range script. I should be swapping over to a tracking disruption script here. And yeah, I'm going to get in range of this Cynabal, and again, even without this tracking disruption script, he wouldn't hit me, but he's definitely not going to hit me here. I see that I had Null started. I think I probably took a shot at the Echo as I went by while my drones worked away on him, but I swapped to Void, benefiting from that 5-second reload time, and now I'm going to kill the Cynabal with the Void DPS and our Hornets plinking away. Cynabals are pretty easy in these low tiers though, because they're going to tackle you, especially with an Afterburner ship. And because they're already so close, especially with the web, you're going to very easily be able to get under their guns, you know, whether it's this fit or even something like a worm. Moving on, let's talk the Tessera. For those of you who, you know, don't really fly a lot of drone boats, if you didn't know, the Tessera is famous for eating drones, and even with these HP bonused Navy Hornets, really you're going to get maybe 2 shots in and you're going to lose one. And similar to the Knight clip, I'm going to show you where I'm not flying perfectly. You see me actually get greedy here, and I went to the cache, letting this Tessera get a little bit too close to me, so I'm focusing on making sure I'm defending myself, and it yellow boxes, and you can see it immediately put my Hornet into armor, and then by the time I recall it, even from that close distance, it has deleted a Hornet. So yeah, pay attention, especially with Tesseras. As soon as you see yellow box, just pull your drones back. Being a little bit closer does help here. And I've tried that with range scripts and tracking speed scripts. It does not matter. The Tessera is still going to be lethal. But what you see me do here is I am using an optimal range script. I'm going to orbit. You can see I'm testing a 7,500 meter orbit here, but what I would honestly do is a 9,000 meter orbit, or honestly you could go a little bit further. But why I like cheating a little bit closer is because you can get some DPS with Null at this range. And then if you really wanted to, you can overheat this tracking disruptor to be able to go a little bit closer and be safe. But again, since you're fighting within brawl range, you're always vulnerable to wrecking shots against Tesseras. And with an AB, if you take a wrecking shot, it is much more difficult to pull range to get to safety. Moving on, let's talk the Kikimora spawn. So, since our actual applied DPS is quite low, you want to take these rooms seriously and focus down this Kikimora. We're going to get in, we're going to orbit this Kikimora at you could do a 500 meter orbit or a 1000 meter orbit, and you're going to kill it with Void, and you're going to apply a tracking speed disruption script when you're close to it. As you're closing in, you can use an optimal range speed script to let you close the distance a little bit before it starts ramping. But you can see here, even with the tracking towers, once we have the script on them, this Kiki will miss some shots. It's not going to miss all of them, but it will help you win the race against it. And why I say take it seriously is, if you try to play passively and decide, oh, you want to fight the Damavik first, you do have 330 DPS, but again, that's 330 DPS when you're within about 3,300 meters. So by the time, you swap targets from the Damavik and move over to the Kikimora, really you're trying to beat a Kikimora DPS with maybe 150 DPS. And, we're running minimal tank because we're relying on what we can mitigate, and you will lose that race. Next up is the Triple Hunter. What we're going to do is we're just going to kite around. We're going to click off to the side at the start of the spawn, similar to what we did in our light missile AB Hawk. We're going to send our drones to the Devoted Hunter, and then we're going to look at the one that's closest to us, and we're going to apply our optimal range disruption script on it, just to help mitigate some of the damage as we get a little bit closer. And then really what you want to do is, at least kill one hunter before you go in. But really, once you're down to 2, you could start making your way towards the cache. And then if you really want to play with pretty much no risk, you could kill 2 and then approach the cache with 1. But honestly, 2 hunters should not kill you. And once we do move in here, I'm pretty sure I'm going to kill them with Null, because by the time I boat into Void range, they're going to be dying. I mean, overall, hunters are slow ships that do a lot of DPS, but they're not particularly tanky. Yeah, as you can see here, I'm well within range of both of the hunters now, and they're really just not making too much of a dent on our tank. So let's move on to the next room. Okay, let's talk through how to fight Skybreakers, and then really, if there's 1 in the spawn, 2 in the spawn, or even 3 in the spawn, it's all going to be mostly the same. You can kill these Skybreakers with just your blaster DPS alone, and what you'll want to do is you're going to get in here, definitely focus the Skybreakers first so you can eventually get your drone DPS out, get the web on them, orbit at either 500 meters or 1000 meters, and kill them with Void. One thing you can do, especially with Navy Hornets, is you can pull them out, do a little bit of DPS, and then once they've taken a bit of damage, you can pull them back in and let them charge back up. And then the other thing that you'll see here is the marshals, or excuse me, the pacifiers will actually fight you at a range where it's less likely to get consistent bounces to your drones. So what I'll do is I'll focus on killing the Skybreaker with guns, and I'll send the drones out to the pacifier. For our last room, let's talk about rogue drone frigates, and this spawn is actually a bunch of blast needles which are firing into our lowest resist. I'm going to cover it here, but how to fight these frigates is the same for pretty much every ship if you are taking too much damage, you just need to fly away. I mean, I'm being greedy here. I'm still going to the cache. I'm still focused on looting, mainly because I'm fairly confident that they're not going to kill me, but you can see me kind of cycle through. I'm killing one drone with Null, I'm killing another one with drones, and just bouncing back and forth. And ultimately, if I was hit a point where I was truly concerned about tank, you're just going to see me double click in space, fly away, and they're going to fall behind. And then one thing you typically don't see me do in any of these guides, but there's plenty of opportunities to overheat to help you get past through some of these more difficult moments. As promised, I'm going to show you a clip of me fighting the Devoted Knight in the Micro Warp Drive fit. You can see I don't run the NOS here, and I'm pretty sure as I approach this guy, I cycled the Armor Ripper when I really didn't need to. I've swapped to a tracking speed script already. We close the distance much faster here. Yeah, I cycled the Armor Ripper there. Don't really need it. And at this point, I'm wondering if I'm really going to pay for it with the newt pressure here. So I'm going to go in on this orbit. I still want to keep this Micro Warp Drive lit. I'm pretty sure I'm looking at his speed and my speed. While I'm under his web, he's under mine. And then if I need to keep the micro, yeah, I look right there. So I'm going to try to turn this Micro Warp Drive off because I want to get the DPS from the gun here. I definitely don't want to get capped out to where I'm only doing drone DPS. I mean, ultimately, I don't think he would kill me, but I would definitely go to a very low cap level. As always, since we're in this close orbit, I don't need the Tracking Disruptor module there, so I cycle that off. So the only cap cost I have right now is the web and the guns, and you can see every time he cycles me, I get pretty low. I think that's about as low as I get there. So yeah, when I build these guides, I mean, I know that I could fight this knight every time and not die in a Micro Warp Drive setup like this, but I don't feel comfortable promoting, you know, low tier fits that require a certain level of, you know, game experience and knowledge and kind of trust in your fits. I mean, this is something that's viable and it would be a little bit more efficient for compared to the AB fit, but definitely get some experience before you make that leap. But yeah, that's the guide for our T1 Ishkur. As always, if you have questions, just hit me up in Abyssal Lurkers in-game or in Discord, or drop me a comment below. Thanks.